candy?
No, Papa.
Telling lies?
No, Papa.
Open your mouth.
Ha, ha, ha.
What would drive a mother to do the unthinkable, to take the life of her own child? It's a question that feels impossible to comprehend, yet in the case of 5-year-old Maha Li Hobbs, the reality is chilling. Maha was a bright, joyful little girl, the kind of child who could light up a room with just her presence. She was full of energy, always smiling, always ready to play. But her life was taken in a way so cold, so deliberate, that it left her family and community in utter disbelief. And at the center of it all was the one person who was supposed to protect her, her own mother, Alexus Nelson. Now, Alexus had originally planned to place Maha for adoption, believing it was the best option for her daughter's future. But when that plan fell through, she made a much more devastating choice. Instead of finding another way forward, Alexus made a decision that would change everything. And after it was done, she went to great lengths to cover her tracks, trying to erase any trace of what had really happened. But before we get into the details of this case, I just want to take a moment to thank you all, my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me, and it helps bring awareness to these important stories. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing true crime community. Now let's get into it. Maha was only 5 years old, but she had a presence that felt so much bigger. She was vibrant, full of life, always laughing. Whether she was running around with her friends or chatting with her family over video calls, she had this way of making everyone around her feel happy. Her grandmother, 𝐬𝐫𝐫, loved those calls, the giggles, the little stories Maha would tell, all the small moments that, looking back now, mean everything. But then, one day the calls stopped, and so did everything else. Maha's future was stolen from her in an instant. Instead of growing up, making memories and living a full life, she became just that. A memory. A little girl who should still be here today but isn't. And then, there's Alexus Nelson. She wasn't always the cold, distant person she later became. At one point, she was just a young woman trying to figure out her life. But Alexus had always struggled, emotionally, financially. She lived far from her family and carried the weight of past experiences that had left her deeply isolated. She was the kind of person who bottled everything up, never asking for help, never reaching out. And the more you learn about her, the more you realize just how much fear controlled her life. She was terrified of the outside world, convinced that everyone was a threat to her daughter. She kept Maha close, away from others, believing that was the safest thing to do. But in the end, it wasn't the world outside that Maha needed protection from. Then there's 𝐸𝐻𝐻 Hobbs, Maha's father. 𝐸𝐻𝐻 had been a part of his daughter's life, until Alexus cut him off completely. 2 years passed without a single visit, a single hug, a single moment shared in person. He tried. He FaceTimed her when he could, but eventually, Alexus stopped answering. And when everything fell apart, he was left with the crushing weight of regret, knowing that while he had tried, it hadn't been enough to save her. But the person who had the strongest gut feeling that something wasn't right, that was 𝐬𝐫𝐻, Maha's grandmother. 𝐬𝐫𝐻 had been worried about Alexus for a while. She noticed the changes, how her daughter was becoming more withdrawn, how the conversations were getting shorter, how promises to stay in touch were being broken more and more often. And then there were the comments. Strange, unsettling remarks about rehoming Maha. 𝐬𝐫𝐻 couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came May 30th, 2023. That was the day 𝐬𝐫𝐻 made a call no grandmother should ever have to make. She contacted the Aurora Police Department and requested a welfare check on her granddaughter. She had too many unanswered questions, too many doubts. Alexus had mentioned adoption, but the details were vague. Too vague. She didn't know which agency, who was involved, or even when it was supposed to have happened. And that wasn't normal. The police took her concerns seriously. They showed up at Alexus's home, knocking on the door, ready to ask questions. And Alexus? She had an answer ready. Almost too ready. She told them that she had placed Maha for adoption through an agency called Adoptions with Love. To make it seem legitimate, she even handed them a phone number, but detectives weren't convinced. They called the agency, hoping to confirm Alexus's claim. But when they did, they got an answer that changed everything. Adoptions with Love had no record of Alexus Nelson. No record of Maha, no adoption, no paperwork, nothing. Now the detectives were looking at Alexus differently. And then, suddenly, her story changed. Again. Now she claimed there was another woman involved, a mysterious Janet Dunn, who had supposedly helped arrange a private adoption. But there were no records of Janet Dunn. No contact information. No agency details. No proof that this woman even existed. And then, Alexus admitted something that sent chills through the investigators. She had thrown away all the adoption-related documents, on purpose, because she didn't want her family looking for Maha. At this point, it was clear something was very, very wrong. And when detectives searched Alexus's phone, what they found made it even worse. There were no emails, no adoption inquiries, no proof of any conversations about placing Maha with another family. But the most disturbing part? There were no pictures of Maha at all. It was as if Alexus had tried to erase her daughter's existence, not just from her phone, but from reality. And the truth? It was far darker than anyone could have imagined. At this point, detectives were convinced Alexus was hiding something. But what? And why? Something was seriously off. And as they peeled back the layers of this case, they were about to uncover secrets buried so deep that even her closest family members had no idea what was coming. So, they dug deeper. A standard background check should have been routine, but what they found, it was anything but. There were no adoption records, none. No sign of an agency assisting Alexus with giving up Maha. No paperwork, no official confirmation, nothing. Her story was unraveling fast, and the more they searched, the more things just didn't add up. Then, they turned to Alexus's phone, and what they found changed everything. Among the usual calls and texts, there were Google searches, ones that sent chills down the investigators' spines. Can you overdose on melatonin? Can you overdose on Xanax? This was no longer just a tragic case of a mother struggling with adoption. This wasn't an accident. It was something much darker. And Alexus? She wasn't talking. When detectives pressed her for answers, she shut down. She dodged every question, her story constantly shifting, never quite landing on a single, solid version of events. Every time they tried to get a straight answer, it was like hitting a brick wall. But then, there was Nick Bagel. Nick was just the building's maintenance worker. He wasn't looking for anything suspicious, just doing his routine inspection of the apartments. Until May 5th, 2023. That was the day his visit to Alexus's unit changed everything. Right away, something felt off. Nick noticed that Maha's bedroom door was locked. But not just locked, secured in a way that made no sense. A string had been tied from the bedroom door to the bathroom door on the opposite side, preventing it from opening. That alone was a red flag. But then, things got weirder. Nick could hear a TV playing inside the room. It seemed harmless at first, but the whole situation felt wrong. When he cut the string and tried to open the door, it was still locked. And that's when Alexus's voice suddenly rang out, coming from a baby monitor. She was yelling at him, telling him to leave. At that moment, Nick knew. This wasn't normal. This wasn't okay. Something was seriously wrong. He left, but the uneasy feeling stuck with him. And in hindsight, that moment, those small, seemingly insignificant details, became crucial to understanding what had really been happening behind those closed doors. By now, the investigation was reaching a boiling point. Detectives secured a search warrant for Alexus's apartment and conducted a full sweep of the unit. What they found? It was disturbing. They started with Maha's room. But the thing was, there was no room. The space was completely empty. No bed, no dresser, no toys, no clothes. Not a single trace of a child ever having lived there. The carpet was stained. What with, they couldn't be sure. But it was clear this place hadn't been the nurturing home Alexus claimed it was. And the rest of the apartment? Somehow it was even worse. No photos of Maha, no children's belongings, no sentimental keepsakes. Nothing. This was supposed to be a home for a little girl, but instead, it felt like an empty shell. Then, detectives seized Alexus's phone for further analysis, and the deeper they looked, the more disturbing things became. There wasn't a single photo of Maha, not on her phone, not anywhere. No baby pictures, no family memories, nothing. It was as if Maha had never existed in Alexus's life, not in the way she was supposed to. The emotional disconnect was jarring, but this wasn't just neglect. It was something far more chilling. Detective 𝐃𝐨𝐽 and his team knew they were running out of time. With mounting evidence and growing suspicions, they secured another search warrant, this time for a much deeper investigation into Alexus's apartment in Aurora, Colorado. They scoured every inch of the unit, every drawer, every closet, every hidden space, and then, on the exterior patio, that's when they smelled it. And in that moment, everything changed. The stench was overwhelming, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. It was the unmistakable odor of decomposition. The detectives braced themselves, their stomachs tightening as the reality of what they were about to uncover settled in. The source of the smell wasn't hard to find. Tucked away behind a pile of old boxes on the exterior patio was a utility closet, a space that should have been filled with harmless household supplies. But when they opened the door, they found something far more disturbing. A large plastic bag, crumpled among other forgotten items. The moment they touched it, the smell intensified. A heavy silence fell over the scene as the detectives exchanged looks, a sense of dread creeping into their bones. Slowly, carefully, they began to open the bag. And then, horror. Inside were human remains, charred beyond recognition. The body of Maha Hobbs. But it wasn't just the discovery itself that shook them. It was the realization of what had been done. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a tragic oversight. Alexus had deliberately tried to destroy the evidence. Among the burned remains, the detectives found bone fragments, including what appeared to be a rib cage. The implications were gut-wrenching. The truth was undeniable now. Maha had been burned in an attempt to erase her existence. Alexus had used the fireplace to incinerate her daughter's body, reducing her to ash and fragments. This wasn't just a crime. This was something far more chilling, an intentional act of destruction. Detective Schwartz stood frozen for a moment, his breath caught in his chest. He had seen a lot in his career, but nothing like this. No amount of experience could prepare someone for the sight of a child reduced to remains in a garbage bag. Detective Roberts turned away, jaw clenched, his face tight with barely contained anger. Even Schwartz, usually composed, felt the weight of this discovery pressing down on him. Cases like these, they leave a mark. No matter how many crime scenes you walk into, no one ever gets used to this. Still, the work had to continue. For Maha, the crime scene team moved in, carefully collecting every piece of evidence. The remains were sent to the coroner's office for examination, but the detectives already knew what the DNA results would confirm. These were Maha's remains. But one question remained. How had she died? The fire had damaged much of the physical evidence, making it harder to determine exactly what happened. The full autopsy report would take time, but one thing was certain. Maha was gone. and Alexus had taken extreme measures to cover up the truth. This wasn't a missing persons case anymore. This was murder. And now, it was time for Alexus Nelson to face the consequences. On May 31, 2023, Alexus was arrested. The woman who once claimed to love and protect her daughter was now in handcuffs, charged with child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, and attempting to influence a public servant. The horrifying reality of Maha's murder had finally come to light. The arrest sent shockwaves through everyone who had once known Alexus, but no one was hit harder than 𝐿 Hobbs, Maha's father. For 2 years, he had been cut off from his daughter. Now, the woman he once trusted had done the unthinkable. A flood of emotions hit him all at once: grief, rage, guilt. He couldn't stop the thoughts racing through his head. Should he have fought harder to stay in Maha's life? Could he have stopped this? But the worst part? He didn't have answers. And he wasn't the only one left shattered. Maha's grandmother, 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐫, was devastated. She had tried to stay involved in her granddaughter's life, even from a distance. But now, that little girl was gone. And the way she had died, the thought of Maha being burned, erased like she never existed, it was too much to bear. As the case unfolded, Alexus's defense team wasted no time crafting their narrative. They pointed to her past, claiming that childhood trauma had shaped her actions. But no matter what excuses they tried to make, one fact remained. A little girl was gone, and Alexus Nelson was responsible. The weight of the moment was unbearable. The stench of decay filled the air, thick and inescapable. The detectives knew, before they even opened that door, that they were about to find something horrific. Tucked away in a utility closet, behind a pile of forgotten boxes, they found a large plastic bag. The closer they got, the stronger the smell became. A deep, unsettling dread settled in their stomachs as they slowly opened it. What they found inside was worse than they could have imagined. The remains of Maha Hobbs burned beyond recognition. But it wasn't just the fact that she was gone. It was how far someone had gone to erase all traces of her existence. Inside the bag, they found bone fragments, including parts of what appeared to be a rib cage. It was clear. Maha's body had been deliberately burned in an attempt to cover up the crime. Alexus had used the fireplace to destroy the evidence, leaving behind only these haunting remnants. It wasn't just about hiding the truth. It was about eliminating every last piece of it. Detective Schwartz stood frozen, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. He had seen a lot in his career, but this was different. Detective Roberts turned away, his jaw tight with emotion. Even the most seasoned investigators couldn't help but feel the gravity of what they had just uncovered. Because no matter how many cases you work, you never get used to something like this. The investigation had already taken a dark turn, but this discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about finding Maha anymore. It was about understanding how someone could do this to their own child. As soon as the remains were found, forensic teams moved in. The evidence was collected carefully, every detail analyzed. The next step was confirming the identity. Deep down, the detectives already knew. DNA testing would prove that the remains belonged to Maha Hobbs, but there was still one crucial question left unanswered. How did she die? The extent of the fire damage made it nearly impossible to determine exactly what had happened. Had Maha lost her life before the fire? Was there another factor involved? The medical examiner had a difficult job ahead, but one thing was certain. This was no accident, and Alexus had gone to extreme lengths to cover up the truth. At this point, there was no doubt. This wasn't a missing person case. Maha was gone. And Alexus? She had done everything in her power to keep the truth buried. But the truth has a way of coming out. On May 31, 2023, Alexus Nelson was arrested. The woman who had once claimed to love and protect her daughter was now facing the consequences of her actions. She was charged with multiple serious offenses, including child abuse resulting in death and tampering with evidence. But perhaps the most chilling charge of all, the attempt to deceive authorities, trying to manipulate the system to cover her tracks. As Alexus was led away in handcuffs, the weight of the situation finally seemed to sink in. There were no more excuses, no more denials, only the cold, hard reality of what she had done. The news sent shockwaves through Maha's family. But for one person, the pain was especially unbearable. Her father, 𝐼𝐸𝐻 Hobbs. He hadn't seen his daughter in 2 years, and now he never would again. The guilt consumed him. Should he have fought harder for custody? Could he have done something, anything to change the course of events? The what-ifs haunted him, but the reality remained unchanged. Maha was gone, and the woman he once trusted, the mother of his child, was responsible. Maha's grandmother, 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐻, was devastated. She had always tried to stay in Maha's life despite the distance. But when she learned the full extent of what had happened, it shattered her. How could her own daughter do this? As the legal process unfolded, Alexus's defense team scrambled to shape their narrative. They pointed to her troubled past, her struggles, her emotional scars. They claimed she was overwhelmed, that she believed no one else could care for Maha the way she could. But the prosecution wasn't having it. Yes, Alexus had a difficult past, but she also had options. She had family, friends, and access to help. Instead of reaching out, she made a choice that ended in tragedy. She wasn't a mother protecting her child. She was someone who had taken a life. As the trial neared, it became clear that the evidence was too strong, the truth too undeniable. Alexus had backed herself into a corner, and on June 12, 2023, she made a decision that stunned everyone. She pleaded guilty: second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, attempting to mislead investigators. The most serious charge, first-degree murder, was dropped as part of a plea deal. But for Maha's family, no legal agreement could undo what had happened. In a packed courtroom, Judge Joseph Whitfield handed down the sentence: 84 years, 48 years for second-degree murder, 24 years for tampering with the remains, 12 years for attempting to mislead a public official. The courtroom was silent as the reality of the sentence settled in. For Maha's family, it was justice. But it wasn't closure. No amount of prison time could bring her back. No punishment could undo what had been done. As Alexus was led away, one question remained. How did it come to this? How does a mother, someone meant to protect, love, and nurture, become the source of unimaginable harm? This case wasn't just about a crime. It was about the tragic consequences of untreated trauma, isolation, and a broken system that let a little girl slip through the cracks. And as the world moves on, one heartbreaking truth remains. Maha deserved better. She deserved a future, a life filled with love, joy, and possibility. Instead, she was taken far too soon. And maybe the most haunting lesson in all of this? Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. Thank you for watching. Take a moment to reflect, because sometimes the most dangerous battles are the ones fought in silence.